medium-term budget from all angles, and for more on that and some of the pronouncements, what they mean for the state of our economy and taxpayers, we're now joined in Parliament by our business anchor, Nzinga Qunta, who's been watching this story unfold. Nzinga, thanks very much for joining us. Let's zone in on the state-owned enterprises because, when we talk about the government having significant contingent liabilities, and this is where they sit in the realm of standing as the guarantor. So what did the minister say about the state of our state-owned enterprises?
Good evening, Peter. Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba getting very tough on state-owned enterprises, saying the state cannot be a nanny for people that cannot run companies themselves. Deputy Finance Minister Sfiso Buthelezi adding his voice in and saying that when it comes to state-owned enterprises, not only are they going to be tougher when it comes to bailouts, but also people responsible for getting the state-owned entities into the financial problems with the mismanagement of funds and the incorrect governance should also be punished, because although the state-owned entities are important and will be saved, the people who contribute to their downward fall should also take responsibility. So very tough talk on state-owned enterprises. Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba zooming in on a few of the state-owned enterprises, not saying anything about a possible bailout for us, the public broadcaster, the SABC, but focusing on Denel, Eskom, SAA. And while he spoke about these bailouts that they are receiving or going to receive in the future, also saying that in the future it's not going to be as simple. It's time to manage governance properly. It's time to stop mismanaging finances. Treasury is going to put together a team of experts who are going to go, he mentioned Eskom specifically, and report back to Treasury, take a look at what's happening at Eskom, make sure that good governance and good practices are being followed, and report back to Treasury periodically so that it doesn't take a while before people can send the alarm when there are problems. Obviously saying there's going to be a new board at Eskom by the end of November. Obviously we know that SAA has a new chairperson who's also starting in November. Almost a push to try and reassure people that although these state-owned enterprises have been bleeding money and are getting billions, tens of billions in SAA's case for this year in 2018, over 300 billion rand for Eskom until 2023, this practice is going to stop, and there's going to be a sense of trying to bring back corporate governance, bring back good financial standing in all these state-owned enterprises so they can be going concern, so that government doesn't need to keep on bailing them out and they bring money in instead of constantly taking money out. Peter? All
right, Nzinga, let's take a look at some of those that you mentioned. South African Airways, well, we know that one of the things that he was proud to say is that it's getting a new board, but there was chatter or a hint maybe about private equity partners?
Yes, so in the press briefing, when he was speaking to us this morning, telling journalists that government wants to work closely with business. Government and business shouldn't be separate, even when it comes to state-owned enterprises. If someone can be a private equity partner, government is open to that. Government is looking to work with business closely. They don't need to own the whole of SA. They don't need to own the whole of state-owned enterprises, because he said it's better to have a percentage of, let's say 55%, I think the amount he used, of SAA, which is making money, than 100% of SAA, which is making 0 rands. So looking to bring business in. There's also initiatives that Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba spoke about earlier on, CEO initiatives, an initiative called Yes, which is going to create 1 million jobs for youth. As we know, youth unemployment is massive in South Africa. We're sitting at about 27.7%. That's a conservative estimate of how much unemployment there is in South Africa. That's obviously also contributing towards our sluggish economic growth, as Manelisi said a little bit earlier on, revised downwards to just 0.7% in 2017. So business is coming on board and trying to work with Treasury, government and Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba to make sure that we get out of this economic situation. Peter, and as Manelisi said, a lot of pushback, even as Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba is coming up with these confidence-boosting measures. We know that the ratings agencies will be watching the speech very closely and seeing what's going to happen. The reaction, as Manelisi said a little bit earlier on, to the Finance Minister's speech, not very warm and receptive from where we were sitting. A lot of pushback to that, but we'll have to see if these plans get implemented and if this path to growth in South Africa is going to happen. Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba saying that by 2020, South Africa is expecting 1.9% growth. And this can only be done if we don't look at tax or trying to plug the dams, but rather look at systemic change, speaking not about radical economic transformation anymore, but inclusive growth, saying the economy can grow if we look at different ways of growing the economy and also including more people in the economy. People who have been included need to be brought in. He was talking about mining, state-owned enterprises running properly, and a systemic change in order to ensure that South Africa has more growth. Peter?
All right, perhaps finally, his biggest concern, I think, of all the SOEs, he says, was that Eskom is too big to fail. And so, again, one of the solutions that he was quite happy to announce is this new board. We've seen new boards come in the past, so that'll be something up for question. But at the back of it all, there's this nuclear question that keeps coming up. How did he address the nuclear acquisition?
Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba saying that we cannot afford nuclear. South Africa's budget cannot afford nuclear. South Africa as a country cannot afford to implement this nuclear deal that's been spoken about so widely. And in a press conference saying to us that he's just repeating what President Jacob Zuma has said, that we will implement nuclear at the pace and speed that South Africa can afford. But Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba saying that until South Africa's economy grows, until these problems that we've spoken about earlier on have gotten rid of, we cannot implement nuclear now. We cannot afford to. Nuclear remains obviously as part of our energy mix in South Africa at the moment. But this much vaunted deal that's been spoken about, this 1 trillion rand that's been spoken about, that has to be pushed through, he says that South Africa cannot afford nuclear. And for now, that's his position. When the economy grows, we can come back to that conversation. But for now, quite firm, saying that he's repeating what President Jacob Zuma said, perhaps in a different way in case people misinterpreted that, saying that nuclear is not happening now, that big nuclear deal.
Nzinga, that's where we'll leave it. Thanks very much indeed. That's our business anchor, Nzinga Qunta, who was following this story from Cape Town, and she was chatting to us from our